The Galactic Council ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, until a human woman walked in and raised one finger. By the time she lowered it, every empire in the room knew they were already surrounded. You know what the problem with being at the top of the galactic food chain for 3,000 years is? You start believing your own propaganda. You forget that somewhere out there in the black, something meaner, smarter, or just plain crazier than you is waiting to knock you down a peg. But hey, I am getting ahead of myself here. My name is Vectrin, and I serve as the junior record keeper for the Galactic Council. Basically, I am the guy who writes down all the stupid things powerful people say so that history can judge them later. Great job, right? Anyway, let me tell you about the day everything changed. The day we invited the humans to their first official hearing. The Grand Chamber was packed that morning. Every species who thought they mattered had sent representatives. The Bovrites occupied the highest tier, naturally, because they had ruled the council for the last millennium and would not shut up about it. The Klar, their current high executor, sat on his elevated throne, looking like someone had sculpted arrogance into physical form. His scales gleamed under the ceremonial lights, each one polished to perfection by some poor servant who probably hated their life. Below him, the Metherian science minister, Jinsara, adjusted her optical enhancers for the third time in as many minutes. She kept muttering calculations under her breath, probably trying to determine the exact percentage of condescension she should display. The Metherians loved their numbers almost as much as they loved reminding everyone else how smart they were. To the left, Krolvax of the Sentinels stood at attention, his forearms crossed in what I can only describe as aggressive boredom. The military chief had that look on his face. You know, the one where you can tell he is already imagining the 17 different ways he could kill everyone in the room if things got interesting. Quinville, the Archon trade magistrate, was busy reviewing economic projections on his datapad, occasionally sighing loud enough to make sure everyone knew he had better places to be. The Archons measured everything in credits, including apparently their own patience. Then the doors opened. The human delegation walked in, and I have got to say they did not look impressive. 3 of them, total. 3. Most species brought entire entourages, staff, guards, advisors, people whose only job was to carry other people's stuff. The humans, 3 individuals in simple, gray uniforms, walking like they owned the place despite being outnumbered about 200 to 3. The one in front caught my attention immediately. Commander Reyna Voss, according to my briefing files, average height for a human, dark hair pulled back in a style that screamed practicality over fashion, and eyes that seemed to catalog every exit, every weapon, every potential threat in about 2 seconds flat. She moved with the kind of confidence that made you wonder what she knew that you did not. The Klar did not even wait for them to reach the speaking platform before he started. "Ah, the primitives have arrived. Tell me, human, did you manage the journey without your vessel falling apart? I understand your technology is, shall we say, charmingly antiquated." Laughter rippled through the chamber. "Real clever, right? Mock the new species before they even get a chance to speak." Classic council move. Jinsara adjusted her optical enhancers again and chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have reviewed your scientific submissions. Quite adorable, really. Your mathematics are almost correct. You might reach our level of understanding in another 1,000 years or so, perhaps 2,000 to be safe." More laughter. I was writing this all down, naturally, wondering if anyone else noticed that Voss had not changed her expression once. Not a frown, not a smile, nothing. She just stood there, waiting. Krolvax uncrossed one set of arms to gesture dismissively. "Your military capabilities are a joke. We have automated defense drones with more firepower than your entire fleet. What exactly do you bring to this council besides entertainment value?" The insults kept coming. Each council member apparently had prepared their own special dig at humanity, and they were not about to let this opportunity pass. The humans were primitive. The humans were weak. The humans were an amusing curiosity at best. Through it all, Commander Reyna Voss just stood there, waiting, and I started to get this feeling in my gut, this little voice that whispered, "Vectrin, you absolute idiot, you are watching something terrible about to happen." But what did I know? I was just the record keeper. The Klar finally raised one of his massive clawed hands, and the chamber fell silent. He leaned forward on his throne, his expression radiating the kind of smug superiority that made you want to throw something at him. Trust me, after 15 years of recording council sessions, I had developed a long list of things I wanted to throw at the Klar. Human, he said, drawing out the word like it tasted funny in his mouth. You have been granted the extraordinary privilege of addressing this council. We are, as you can see, skeptical of your species' qualifications for membership. The floor is yours. Convince us that you are worth our time if you can. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Every eye in that chamber was on Voss, waiting for her to stumble, to get angry, to make some desperate plea for acceptance. That is what new species usually did. They begged, they groveled, they promised resources, technology, anything to get a seat at the table. Rena Voss did none of those things. Instead, she took exactly 3 steps forward, stopped at the precise center of the speaking platform, and looked up at Teklar with an expression that I can only describe as pleasantly neutral, like she was about to discuss the weather. Then she smiled, and let me tell you something about that smile. It did not reach her eyes. You want proof of humanity's worth, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber with crystal clarity, no nervousness, no hesitation. You want to know what we bring to your council. Fair enough. She paused, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Let me show you something. And then I kid you not, she raised her right hand and extended her middle finger. Just one finger. Pointing straight up at the ceiling. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Jensara's optical enhancers nearly fell off her face as she leaned forward, trying to understand what she was seeing. Quinville actually looked up from his datapad, which might have been the first time in recorded history he had stopped calculating profits for more than 5 seconds. Krolovax's forearms tensed, his combat instincts probably screaming that this was either a weapon or a threat, but he could not figure out which. The Klar's scales rippled with irritation. What is the meaning of this absurd gesture? This? Voss said, wiggling the finger slightly. This is a human finger. One single, solitary finger. Seems pretty insignificant, right? Weak, primitive, useless. She walked slowly across the platform, her finger still raised, and the entire council tracked the movement like it was a loaded weapon. Which, in retrospect, I suppose it was. Do you know what a human can do with one finger? She asked, her tone conversational, almost friendly. The kind of friendly that predators use right before they pounce. Nobody answered. We were all too busy trying to figure out where this was going. With one finger, Voss continued. A human can pull a trigger. One finger can press a button that launches a missile. One finger can activate a bomb. One finger can send a message across the galaxy. One finger can write an equation that changes everything we know about physics. She paused at the edge of the platform, turning to face the council directly. One finger can flip a switch that turns off your life support. One finger can redirect an asteroid. One finger can delete your entire civilization's financial records. One finger can type the code that crashes your planetary defense network. The murmuring stopped. The chamber was dead silent now. But you know what the really funny thing is? Voss asked, and that smile was back, sharp as broken glass. That is just one finger, one single, primitive, useless little finger. She slowly lowered her hand, letting it rest at her side, and when she spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but somehow everyone heard every single word. Now imagine what we can do with 10. I looked around the chamber and saw something I had never seen before in 3 decades of council sessions. I saw fear, real, genuine, cold sweat down your back fear spreading across the faces of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, and Rena Voss just stood there, waiting again like she had all the time in the universe. The cloud scales had lost some of their shine. Jensara was the first to recover, because of course she was. The Metherians never could resist the urge to prove they were the smartest beings in the room, even when keeping their mouths shut would have been the wiser choice. Preposterous, she declared, her voice hitting that particular frequency that said she was about to explain why everyone else was wrong. You are attempting to intimidate this council with biological appendages. Your fingers are simple manipulators, no different from the grasping organs of 100 other species. There is nothing special about them. Voss turned to face her, and I swear I saw amusement flicker across her face. You think so? Tell me, Minister Jensara, how long did it take your species to develop faster than light travel? Jensara blinked, caught off guard by the question. Approximately 4,000 cycles of research and development. Why is that relevant? 4,000 cycles, Voss repeated, nodding thoughtfully. Impressive, really. That is quite an achievement. Now let me tell you about a human named Katherine Johnson. One human. She used her fingers, a pencil, and her brain to calculate the trajectory for our first manned space mission. By hand. While your species was still debating the theoretical possibility of breaking the light barrier, humans with fingers and paper were already planning to visit other worlds. She held up her index finger. One woman, 10 fingers, changed the course of human history. Quinville finally set down his data pad, which should have been everyone's first warning that things were getting serious. Anecdotal evidence proves nothing. One individual's accomplishment does not represent species-wide capability. Oh, you want more examples? Voss asked, and there was definitely laughter in her voice now. How about Alexander Fleming? Used his fingers to handle a petri dish that had gotten contaminated. Most scientists would have thrown it away. He did not. He used those primitive little fingers to investigate further, and whoops, he accidentally saved approximately 200 million lives by noticing penicillin. Just fingers and curiosity. No fancy Matherian computational systems. No Archon economic models. Just a human paying attention. She started counting on her fingers, which would have been funny if it was not so deliberately insulting. Marie Curie. Fingers covered in radioactive material, conducting experiments that gave us entirely new understanding of atomic structure. Lost her life to it, but those discoveries, still saving lives centuries later. Another finger. Galileo Galilei. Used his fingers to grind lenses, built a telescope, pointed it at the sky, and casually proved that the universe did not revolve around his planet. The religious authorities wanted to execute him for it. He kept doing the work anyway. Another finger. Benjamin Franklin. Flew a kite in a thunderstorm like an absolute lunatic, used his fingers to conduct electricity, and laid the groundwork for everything from power grids to the device you are using to record this conversation right now. She looked directly at me when she said that last part, and I nearly dropped my recording stylus. How did she even know I was here? Krolvax shifted his weight, all forearms now uncrossed. I had seen that stance before. It was his combat-ready position. These are scientists and explorers. What about warfare? What can your fingers do when faced with superior military force? Oh, Krolvax. You poor, stupid, overly muscled fool. Voss's smile got wider. I am so glad you asked. Let me tell you about a human named Vasily Arkhipov, Soviet submarine officer, Cold War era, back when humans were still figuring out how not to annihilate ourselves. His submarine was being depth-charged by enemy forces. The captain wanted to launch a nuclear torpedo. The political officer agreed. They just needed one more authorization. She paused, letting the tension build. Vasily Arkhipov said no. He used his finger to refuse to sign the order. That one finger, that one refusal probably prevented a nuclear war that would have killed hundreds of millions, maybe billions of humans. One finger, one decision, one man who decided that maybe incinerating the planet was not the best tactical option. The silence in the chamber had quality to it now, like everyone was holding their breath and afraid to let it out. But hey, Voss continued, her tone bright and cheerful in a way that made my scales itch. Maybe you want offensive examples instead of defensive ones. Let me tell you about the Manhattan Project. Bunch of humans using their fingers to calculate, to build, to assemble the first atomic weapons. They used those same fingers to write the equations, to machine the components, to arm the devices. She held up both hands now, wiggling all 10 fingers. 2 bombs, 2 cities, 200,000 casualties. And that was with primitive technology. We have gotten so much better since then. The Clar's throne suddenly seemed a lot less imposing. In fact, he looked like he wanted to sink into it and disappear. Jinsara had stopped adjusting her optical enhancers. Quinville had actually gone pale, which I did not even know Archons could do. Krolvax's combat stance had shifted from ready to cautious, his eyes tracking Voss like she might suddenly explode. And me? I was writing all of this down with fingers that were shaking just a little bit, because I was starting to understand something terrifying. We had not invited the humans to ask for membership. They had accepted our invitation as a courtesy. The Clar cleared his throat, which in Boverate physiology sounds like rocks grinding together in a garbage disposal. He was trying to regain control of the situation, bless his scaly little heart. Commander Voss, you have made your point. Individual humans have accomplished noteworthy feats. However, the Council evaluates species based on collective capability, not individual achievement. What has humanity accomplished as a unified whole? Oh, the Klar, you magnificent idiot. You just had to ask. Voss clasped her hands behind her back, and somehow that simple gesture made her look twice as dangerous. Collective achievement. Right. Let me tell you what happens when humans work together, when we combine all those useless little fingers toward a common goal. She began pacing, and every head in the chamber followed her movement. In 1969, humans put 2 of our species on our moon. Now, I know what you are thinking. Big deal, right? Lots of species achieve spaceflight. But here is the thing that makes it special. We did it with computers that had less processing power than the device currently translating my words for you. We did it with slide rules, mechanical switches, and about 400,000 people all using their hands to build, to calculate, to problem solve. She stopped pacing and turned to face Jinsara directly. Your species took 4,000 cycles to develop faster than light travel. Humans went from the first powered flight to walking on another celestial body in 66 years. 66. We went from barely leaving the ground to leaving our planet in less time than it takes most of your politicians to agree on lunch. Jinsara opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The math was doing the talking, and even she could not argue with numbers. But maybe space exploration does not impress you, Voss continued. Let me tell you about the Human Genome Project. 3 billion base pairs of genetic code. Mapped, sequenced, understood. Humans used their fingers to pipette samples, to operate equipment, to write the software that decoded the very blueprint of our existence. We cracked the code of life itself, and then we made it open source, free, available to anyone who wanted it. Quindle actually flinched at that. The concept of giving away valuable information for free probably caused him physical pain. We built the Large Hadron Collider, Voss said, her voice picking up momentum now. 27 kilometers of tunnel, buried underground, built by 10,000 scientists and engineers from over 100 countries. All those fingers working together, building a machine that smashes particles together at near light speed just to see what happens. We discovered the Higgs boson. We proved the existence of fundamental particles that make up reality itself, for science, for knowledge. Because we wanted to know. She held up her hands again, and this time there was nothing playful about the gesture. But you want to know about military capabilities, right? You want to know what humans can do when we are scared, when we are angry, when we decide that something needs to be destroyed. Fine. The temperature in the chamber definitely dropped this time. I was not imagining it. World War II. Global conflict. 60 million casualties. Humans built tanks, aircraft, ships, weapons on a scale that turned entire continents into battlefields. We developed radar, sonar, jet engines, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons, all within about 6 years. 6 years of industrial production so intense that we literally reshaped our entire planet's economy around the concept of warfare. Krolvax leaned forward, suddenly very interested. We put factories in orbit. Voss continued. We militarized our asteroid belt. We built weapons platforms that can glass a planet from 3 light-years away. We developed nanoscale weapons that can disassemble matter at the molecular level. We created artificial intelligence systems that can calculate battle strategies faster than your best tactical computers, and then we taught them creativity, because apparently efficiency was not terrifying enough. She paused, letting that sink in. And here is the really fun part. Everything I just told you. That is all public information. That is the stuff we put in our museums, our history books, our educational programs. That is the technology we let civilians access. That is what we show visiting digressive species when they ask politely about our capabilities. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop if anyone had been stupid enough to drop one. You want to know what our military actually has? Voss asked softly. What our fingers have built in the classified research facilities, the black budget projects, the programs that do not officially exist. So do I. I am not cleared for most of it, but I can tell you this much. If humans can build weapons that scare other humans, weapons that we ourselves have nightmares about, what do you think we can do to species we have just met? The Klar had gone completely still on his throne. His scales had dulled to a sickly gray color that I had only seen once before, on a Bavrit who had just realized he was standing in an active minefield. Jinsara was furiously calculating something on her data pad, her manipulators moving so fast they were blurring. I would bet credits she was running probability models, trying to determine if Voss was bluffing. The numbers apparently were not coming back in her favor, because she had gone very, very quiet. Quinville was staring at his economic projections like they had personally betrayed him. I imagine he was recalculating the cost-benefit analysis of insulting a species that could apparently annihilate you 17 different ways before breakfast. Kralvax, to his credit, just nodded slowly. He understood. Warriors always recognize other warriors, and he was looking at Voss with the kind of respect you reserve for someone who could absolutely kill you, but has chosen not to. Yeah, and Reyna Voss just stood there, hands still clasped behind her back, waiting, always waiting, like she had already won and was just being polite enough to let us figure it out. Mikla finally found his voice, though it came out about 3 octaves higher than his usual commanding rumble. Commander Voss, I believe we may have started this meeting on, shall we say, an unfortunate tone. Perhaps we should discuss the terms of humanity's membership in a more collaborative spirit. Collaborative. That was rich. 5 minutes ago he had been calling them primitives, and now he wanted to collaborate. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. Voss tilted her head slightly, like she was considering his offer. Membership? Who said anything about membership? The confusion that spread through the chamber was palpable. Every council member exchanged glances, trying to figure out if they had misunderstood the purpose of this meeting. I apologize, Jinsara said carefully, her voice stripped of its earlier condescension. We were under the impression that humanity had requested admission to the Galactic Council. Was our information incorrect? Oh, we requested admission, Voss confirmed. 6 months ago, you denied it. Called us too primitive, too violent, too unstable. Said we needed another 1,000 years of development before we would be ready to sit at the big kids' table. She smiled again, and I was really starting to hate that smile. So we stopped asking. Quinville's data pad slipped from his manipulators and clattered onto the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. Then why are you here? Kralvax demanded, his forearms tensing again. What is the purpose of this meeting? Voss reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger. Another one of those primitive little fingers, and the gesture felt loaded with meaning. I am here to deliver humanity's terms for allowing the Galactic Council to continue operating in our region of space. The chamber exploded. Council members were on their feet, shouting, demanding explanations, calling for security. The Clur was bellowing something about jurisdiction and authority. Jinsara was frantically trying to pull up star charts. Quinville had forgotten all about his data pad and was screaming about trade violations. Voss just stood there, waiting for the chaos to die down. That data chip still held casually between her fingers. When the noise finally subsided, she continued like there had been no interruption at all. You see, while you were busy congratulating yourselves on how advanced you are, humans were doing what humans do best. We were exploring, we were expanding, we were building. She gestured to the massive star chart that dominated one wall of the chamber. Your council claims jurisdiction over approximately 47 star systems, correct? Very impressive. You have had 3,000 years to establish that territory. Must be proud. The sarcasm in her voice could have stripped paint. Humanity has been in space for less than 300 years. In that time we have established permanent settlements in 73 star systems. We have mining operations in 112 asteroid belts. We have research stations in 46 nebulae. We have jump gates, relay stations, and defense platforms scattered across a region of space that, funny enough, happens to include about 70% of your territory. Jinsara's optical enhancers actually did fall off this time. She did not even notice. That is impossible, the Clar whispered. Our surveys would have detected such expansion. We would have known. Would you? Voss asked pleasantly. Because here is the thing about human technology. We are really, really good at stealth. We spent centuries perfecting the art of hiding things from each other, usually right before we tried to kill each other. Submarines, stealth aircraft, cloaking satellites. When we finally got to space, we brought all those skills with us. She tossed the data chip onto the council floor. It bounced twice and came to rest at the base of Thaklar's throne. That chip contains the location of every human installation, every ship, every defense platform currently operating in this region. Study it carefully. Notice how many of them are within strike range of your homeworlds. Notice how many of them have been there for decades without you noticing. Notice how thoroughly we have surrounded you while you were busy feeling superior. Krolvax moved faster than I had ever seen him move, snatching up the chip and jamming it into the nearest reader. The holographic display that materialized above the council floor was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Thousands of points of light, each one representing a human installation, formed a web that crisscrossed council space like a neural network, or a net, or a noose. By the ancients, Quinville breathed. You have been planning this for decades. Longer, Voss confirmed. We started the day you rejected our first application for membership. You taught us that asking nicely does not work with the Galactic Council, so we stopped asking. We started taking, quietly, carefully, patiently. She clasped her hands behind her back again. So here are humanity's terms. You can accept us as equal members of this council, with full voting rights and territorial recognition, or you can continue to insist we are too primitive for membership, in which case we will simply ignore your authority entirely and continue expanding. Your choice. The Klar looked like he had swallowed something toxic. And if we refuse both options? If we demand you withdraw from council space? Voss's expression did not change, but somehow the temperature dropped another few degrees. You can try, she said quietly, but I would not recommend it. Remember what I said about 10 fingers. High Executor. Now imagine 8 billion humans, all working together, all very motivated to prove that we belong in this galaxy. She let that hang in the air for a moment. So, shall we discuss the details of our membership, or do you need more time to recalculate your position? Nobody spoke. What was there to say? The vote was unanimous. Of course it was. Humanity became a full member of the Galactic Council with all the rights, privileges, and territorial recognition they had asked for 6 months earlier. The same council that had called them primitives was now tripping over themselves to offer trade agreements, research partnerships, and mutual defense pacts. It was pathetic, honestly, but also kind of hilarious. I watched Raina Voss sign the membership charter with a simple pen, using those same fingers she had spent the last hour turning into philosophical weapons. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She just signed the document, shook hands with each council member using proper diplomatic protocol, and left with the same quiet confidence she had entered with. After the humans departed, the council chamber descended into controlled chaos. The Klar immediately called for a full military assessment of human capabilities. Jinsara demanded access to human scientific databases. Quinville wanted economic projections for the next century. Krolvax just sat there staring at the holographic display of human installations, occasionally shaking his head like he could not quite believe what he was seeing. But me? I just sat in my little corner, writing everything down and thinking about what had really happened here. See, the thing that nobody wanted to admit out loud was that we had been played, completely, thoroughly, brilliantly played. Humanity had not stumbled into galactic politics as naive newcomers. They had not desperately needed our approval or our protection. They had walked into that chamber already holding all the cards, and they had let us insult them, mock them, underestimate them, because it made the final reveal so much more devastating. They had turned our arrogance into a weapon and used it against us. I pulled up the historical files on humanity that night, reading through everything we had on their species. Most of it was surface-level observations, tourist information, public broadcasts. But buried in there, if you knew where to look, were patterns. Humans had a saying, speak softly, and carry a big stick. Another one, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And my personal favorite, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. They had dozens of these little wisdom nuggets accumulated over thousands of years of fighting each other, and every single one of them was about strategy, patience, and making your opponent underestimate you. We had assumed that because their technology looked primitive, they were primitive. We had assumed that because they were new to galactic politics, they were weak. We had assumed that because they smiled and asked politely, they were harmless. We had assumed wrong. Here is what I think really happened. And this is just my personal theory, mind you, not official record. I think humanity knew exactly what the Council's response would be when they applied for membership. I think they expected the rejection. I think they wanted the rejection, because it gave them 6 months to build their infrastructure, establish their presence, and prepare their ultimatum without anyone paying attention. They had baited us into dismissing them, and we had taken that bait like hungry fish. The scariest part. The data chip Bose had tossed on the floor. I managed to get a copy for the official records. I spent 3 days analyzing it, cross-referencing the locations with our own survey data. Want to know what I found? Every single human installation listed on that chip was perfectly positioned. Not just militarily, though that was certainly part of it. They were positioned for resource extraction, for scientific research, for trade routes, for colonization. They had not just been hiding from us, they had been building an empire while we were busy congratulating ourselves on ours. And the final kicker. 2 weeks after humanity joined the Council, 3 more species applied for membership. Species we had never heard of. Species that, according to their applications, had been working with humanity for over a decade. Humanity had not just infiltrated our territory. They had been making friends, building alliances, creating an entire coalition right under our noses. Declar called an emergency session when he found out. He was furious, demanding to know why our intelligence networks had failed so completely. Voss attended the session, listened to him rant for about 20 minutes, and then casually mentioned that if the Council wanted better intelligence gathering, perhaps they should hire some humans. After all, we were clearly very good at it. The look on Declar's face was worth every credit I had ever earned. So yeah. That is the story of how the Galactic Council learned that humanity was not asking for permission to join the big leagues. They were informing us that they had already arrived and we could either accept it gracefully or get out of the way. I am Vectrin, Junior Record Keeper for the Galactic Council, and I have been documenting galactic politics for 3 decades. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have recorded wars, treaties, betrayals, and alliances. But I have never seen anything quite like the day a human woman raised a single finger and brought the most powerful governing body in the galaxy to its knees. Want to know the funniest part? She never even raised her voice. Turns out when you are holding all the cards, you do not need to.